Five, four, three, two, one. Hey gang, and welcome back to Alien Protocols. We have a very special guest, as you can see, the one and only, the legendary Grant Cameron. Grant, thank you so much for being on with us. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, AP, for having me on. I'm honored to be here.
You have such a vast knowledge base. Your experience is really, there's very few people with your experience and your research and everything, but a lot of people don't know about your personal experiences. They've heard about your initial Charlie experience, and I love how Canadians give them a name. You know, Canadians are so personable. I lived in New Brunswick for 4 years, and I've had many a Tim Hortons biscuit and coffee.
There you go. There you go.
But you also had an amazing experience at Shasta. But would you kind of walk us through some of your personal experiences, the things that electrified you, that you had encounters with phenomena?
Okay. It's important to bring in the phenomena because basically people will talk about, I know, you just believe. You'll hear this a lot in ufology. And basically what I say is the people who are saying they know are actually the people who are the believers. It's exactly reversed. And when you've had an experience, you know. Those are the only people that really know what's going on. I mean, you may not have the right interpretation, but you actually were there. So a lot of what's happened in ufology, I think, is people are sort of off on the wrong track. Even now, you've heard this recent thing with ATIP where they've got this program where they're going to analyze material. And it's the same road. It's the same thing that it's like banging your head against a wall. What we're going to do again is we're going to take a bunch of material and we're going to say, this is metamaterial. It's got weird isotopes. We can't build this, whatever. And people are so busy trying to prove that the phenomena is real. And it doesn't go anywhere. It's like the only way you can really know it's for real is to actually experience it. So to me, it's like, why are you wasting your time with, sightings? Why are you wasting your time with metamaterials? Because it's not going to get you anywhere except to prove to your skeptical relatives and friends that this thing's for real. And so I guess I'm honored in that my whole thing started with a very dramatic experience. I had no interest in UFOs. I had no thought of extraterrestrials, nothing. So when it happened to me, I immediately knew this was surreal. And I have never in 43 years really spent much time trying to prove to people that it's real. I don't care what you believe. It's like, and it is your belief. You believe that I didn't see what I saw, whatever. I know what I saw. It's like the famous expression. So the ones that I saw initially were very dramatic. As what happened was I was at university and I really didn't know what I was doing at university. I was expected to go because I had fairly high marks and stuff. And my parents expected me to go. And so I was there, but I really didn't know what I was doing there. I was taking calculus and I was wondering, like with calculus, like what happened to all the numbers and what are we going to do? How do you make money out of this crap? And I mean, I was just like totally frustrated. So when I had the sighting, the initial sighting, and as I've told the story numerous times, the only reason I went there was because people were seeing this thing all the time and it was in the paper. And so I said to my friend, why don't we go look what they're looking at? And I never thought we'd see anything. So when I first saw the object, which came from the left to the right, down low in front of the car, it was not a light in the sky. It was an object flying in front of the car. I was just totally blown away because I really had done a lot of study with paranormal phenomena, but I'd never experienced anything. And still to this day, I really haven't experienced any sort of real paranormal phenomena. Experienced some UFO stuff. But so when I saw it, I went, wow, there is actually weird stuff. There is actually stuff. I'm sort of floored by the thing because there's no doubt what I'd seen. It was there's no way it was anything other than.
Can you physically describe it?
Well, it was a plasma object, so it was very intense. It was red. You could see it was longer than it was high, but you couldn't see the shape. You couldn't see the exact edge of the thing because the intensity of the plasma was so dramatic. And it was pulsing. It looked like it was alive. It was just this slow red pulse. And it was moving up and down. It wasn't moving in a straight line. It was down very, very low to the ground. In fact, it was going in behind these set of school buses that were there on the side of the road. And I remember getting out of the car while the car was still moving because I knew that thing was going to go in behind these school buses. It was so down low that I knew it would get behind the school buses. I wouldn't be able to see it anymore. And I wanted to run through the ditch to get through this watch this thing fly away. And I remember it was there, and it was this pulsing, and it was bobbing up and down. It was sort of moving. It was very, very low to the ground and moving slow, like maybe, I don't know, 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, very, very slow. And I remember watching it fly away into the distance, and it was sort of like, I've thought about that many times in 43 years. It was sort of like, it didn't seem to be doing anything. And then it was, when I put all the sightings together, then I'm thinking, well, maybe it really was doing nothing except appearing for me. And at that time, I thought it was a random event. And now I say, when I talk to people, you think this is a random event, think again. Why do UFOs have lights on them? They have lights on them so you can see them. They want you to see them. And that was the whole deal, was when it first happened, and this is kind of important, when it first happened, the sighting started the same time as the Americans put in the anti-ballistic missile unit in North Dakota. It was the only one that ever went operational.
Oh, wow.
And they put those missiles in, that's when it started, on our side of the border. And the report started in February of 1975, but we didn't go. And I said, let's go. And we didn't. We said, okay, we'll go. But we never went. We kept driving around the city and goofing around, whatever, doing nothing. And then 3 months later, it got caught on the ground. And it was filmed, this thing jumping off the ground. And it went in 3 frames of film. It jumped 5,000 feet in 3 frames of film. Wow. And the camera was 8.25 miles away. So it was a very dramatic event. And years later, when I looked at that second event of the cameraman standing there, and the cameraman's looking through the camera lens, and he said, the next time this thing glows up, I'm going to shoot. And as he pushed, the thing started to glow, and he pushed the trigger, and as he pushed the trigger, it jumped. And 35 years later, 40 years later even, I said, that wasn't random. It jumped just as he pushed the trigger. It was like he was communicating with the thing, and the thing is saying, are you ready to push the trigger? I'm going to jump. And this thing jumped this up into the sky, and it became a viral film, and that's why we went out. So in the 2.5 years that we were there, I had a lot of sightings. I mean, I tell the story of driving off the end of the road one night, because you could actually chase this thing. You could actually catch up on this thing. It was moving that slow. You could actually catch up on it. And I remember the one night we were driving, and I had all these kids. I'd take these kids out who lived on my street. They were a bit younger than I was, and I was fairly young. And so I remember the one time, and that's when I learned we have these what are called mile roads. These mile roads, every mile, and then mile roads north and south. So it would leave this checkerboard pattern across the country. So you would drive down a road, you could turn the lights off and go at like 60, 70 miles an hour down a road with no lights in the middle of the night because it was straight until I realized that because the world is round, every eighth mile, they move the road 50 feet. So I'm zipping along, and I went off the end of this road, and I still remember it. I'm up in the air in the car, and I'm thinking, oh, we got abducted. That's all. I got very fast. We got abducted. And then we landed in this field. Luckily, there was snow in the field. We landed in this field. But that's when I realized every 8th mile, they moved the road 50 feet because the world is round. And so we'd do stuff like that. And I had 5 close-up encounters in 2 years.
Wow.
I had 5 that were close. I had 3 that were really close. And I had one that I always tell, it was April of 1976. I was within feet of this thing. And it was a plasma-type object. It had sort of evaded us for about, I guess it went on for about 45 minutes. We'd be on this road, it'd be in front of us. We'd drive up, it was orange, as orange as an orange, like really orange.
Wow. And
we'd drive up on the thing, and it would always stay the same distance ahead of the car. We went down 8 miles, and this thing was sitting on a bridge. And it was if we were draining the water from the field. So we were on this road, like one of these mile roads, and it looked like we were in the middle of the ocean, just with this road going through. And the water was probably only maybe 2 or 3 inches high, but all there was water around us. That's all you could see was water and this road going through the water. And I remember it was on this road and on this ditch where they would drain the water off the fields. And it was sitting on the bridge, and then I could see exactly where it was. It was sitting this far away from the edge of the bridge. I'm going, whoa, it's sitting on the bridge. And we went up to the bridge, and it was gone. And then we got out, and we looked under the bridge. We figured it's got to be under the bridge because it wasn't in front of us anymore. And we couldn't find it. And then I remember at that time, the National Enquirer had put out a reward for $1 million for someone to bring a UFO in. And somebody had put in what's called a Bates ball, which was got out of a field in Florida. I remember it was a steel ball, had no seams in it. They had x-rayed the thing, and this thing I think is still around, and you could see there was something in it, but there was no seams on this thing. So I said, it's got to be one of these Bates balls, because it was in the National Enquirer. It's got to be one of these balls. And we're looking, I couldn't find it. So we'd go down the road, past the bridge. Now the thing's behind us. For the first time, it's behind us. Go back up on the bridge again. The gut thing is gone. And we're looking under the bridge. It's got to be under the bridge. Turned off the light. It's under the bridge. Then we went back where we came from, going into the north. We went about a quarter of a mile. And my friend, who later became a public relations officer for a billion-dollar corporation, was with me. And I said, come on, Jim, let's go back to the bridge. It's back. It's there. It's back at the bridge. So this time, because we knew it had evaded us twice. And so instead of driving the car up onto the bridge, we actually walked. I had an 8mm movie camera. And I remember I'd take 7 steps and then I'd shoot 3 seconds of film. 7 steps, 3 seconds of film. Wow. 7 steps, 3 seconds of film. And next thing you know, I was so close. And I remember there was an event that happened in 1967. It was called the Mikulak Affair. It was studied by the Blue Book. This is Stephen Mikulak, who was at Falcon Lake, which is just outside of me, maybe a mile, an hour and a half east of me, where he got burned. This thing was on the ground. He put his hand on it. The thing moved, and he got these burns, and his shirt was burning, had these sort of radiation burns. And these things would come back every couple of years. So I knew he'd been burned. I knew about that story. And I knew that I could get burned, but I was going to touch this thing. I was that close. I knew I got close enough, and I knew it was going to go under the bridge. It was going to take off. It was going to turn off the light. And this was my one chance. So I said to my friend, I said, Jim, hold the camera. I'm going to jump on it. And I still remember that. I'm standing there. And I knew I was going to run, and I was going to jump and try to hit it as it took off or whatever it was going to do, whatever. And it was at that point he said, oh, well, what's that? He said, there's one sitting on top of the car. And I went, what? And I turned around, and he had binoculars. I had the movie camera. He had the binoculars. So I took the binoculars, and I looked on the car. And for a guy who had no paranormal experiences to see this, it was like just bizarre. It was like the car was sitting there a quarter of a mile away in the north, and it looked like the sun coming up in the north. It was this orange ball, had a semisphere sitting on top of the car. So it was like a half of sphere sitting on top of the car, and the orange smoke was hanging down the sides of the car. And I went, wow. Whoa, it's sitting on the car. And I started to run. It took about 3 or 4 steps, and I go, oh, no. Turn around, sure enough, the one at the bridge is gone. So we're committed now. So we kept running, and the thing moved on to the front hood. Then you could see it through the back and through the front window. It looked like the inside of the car was on fire. It was sitting on the front hood. And then it went down in front of the car, I guess, and went into the water or whatever. Got back to the car, and we looked around, and there was these orange lights all around it sitting, and they were sitting above the water. I thought that at first there were 2 of them on top of each other, but it actually was, they were just sitting on the water, and the reflection coming off the water, it looked like 2 oranges. So these oranges were all over the place. It was so weird. We were in the middle of nowhere because there's no towns, nothing around there. And we're sitting there, and all these lights were completely surrounded by all these lights. I looked back at the bridge, and the thing's back at the bridge. And I said, Jim, let's go. It's back at the bridge. I want to jump on this thing. Let's go. Let's go back to the bridge. And he said, no, I don't want to go. And I don't know what to do. I put my hand on top of the car, like, here I'm an investigator. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I have no idea what to do. You know, who expected the thing to sit on top of the car? And he said he looked for the keys. He got in the car, and he looked for the keys. And I said, come on, let's go. He said, no, I don't want to go back. And I said, and I was fighting with him. And it was his car, so we didn't go back. And we took off. The next night, I remember him and his friend were there, and they were driving down the road at 60 miles an hour, chasing these orange lights and stuff. Years later, he sort of denied. He said, you know, you always were the gullible kind. And I went, what? He said,
you were by oranges.
So afraid you didn't want to go back. And then he sort of backed away from me. And that's where I said this belief and knowing that, you know, if you don't believe, if you've never seen anything, I don't care. I mean, I don't care what you think. I mean, I'm not offended. If I hadn't seen anything, I may not believe either. But when you've seen it and you were so scared you didn't want to go back, and it ended this night where I could have touched this thing or got better film of this thing. So that's how it started for me. And I've only had a couple of sightings since then. Nothing really dramatic, but I did have
for a second and talk about that sighting, because that is such an amazing sighting. That is one of the most dramatic sightings I've heard in a long time. And the fact that you had multiple in a short period of time, and the fact that you were a skeptic before this, and that your life.
I never thought about it. I never thought about the subject. It didn't. I was interested in Edgar Casey. I'd done a study on near-death on dying people. This is when near-death experiences first started, about 1975. So I'd gone to a hospital and I'd asked all the weird questions like, is it true that people predict their death? You ever heard anybody predict their death when and they'd say, oh yeah, and they'd tell you these stories about somebody saying, today I'm going to die, and they would die this day, you know, and stuff like that. And stories about people coming to pick people up when they die, near-death experiences. I had all these weird things. So I was into weird stuff.
But this changed your life. This
absolutely
completely changed the direction of your life.
I've had 3 major events that changed my life. One was my initial UFO experience, which absolutely flipped me off the end of the earth. I said, okay, that's it. I know what I'm doing. Forget this university crap. And I would go and I would just take courses that interested me. I wasn't interested in getting a degree or anything. I took a bunch of courses after that, but I knew that this is sort of like my obsession. And then I would get a job that made me enough money just to pay the bills so I could do this stuff on the side. And so I had that experience. Then I had this experience with Dr. Michael Newton, which was the second most dramatic experience I had. And that was the one where I'm in a lecture. He's a UFO conference, and he's talking about the 7,000 regressions with the life between life, where he regresses people and brings them into the spirit world. That one just sort of, I mean, I just really just like, I just lost it after that. I was like, whoa, it all made sense to me. And the third was my download experience. So these initial experiences, I had 5 close. So I'll give you the 5 experiences I had close. I had the first one the first night, and that was, it's hard to say how far it was away, but I'd say, because it's at night, you don't really know anything at night. You can't really tell distances or sizes and stuff. But I would guess it was maybe half a mile down the road, maybe 100 feet off the ground. The second night, so I dragged all my friends. I said, man, you're going to see this. I'm just like, holy cow, this is like amazing. I dragged all my friends out there the second night, and we're looking for this airport. There's a guy named is Bob Deemert. He was a very famous guy. He invented the industry with rebuilding World War II planes. He was famous for this. And so I knew that his airport he was sort of the center of this thing in Carmen, Manitoba, is this town. He owned the airport. So we're trying to find the airport. We're at night. We don't know where the airport is. And it's just a small airport. So we don't have landing lights on or anything at night or whatever. Nobody's landing at night. And we're actually standing right by his airport. I didn't realize it. And I got all my friends there, and everybody's there. There's all these people and kids out there drinking beer. You know, it's in the, in the countryside and stuff like that. And there was 28 people on the road I was on. I mean, there's everybody all over the place. Everybody's out trying to see this thing. So I dragged all my friends out there, and when the thing finally came, there was only about 8 people left. There was 2 cars. There was our car, and there was this other car that I remember when the thing appeared. The second time it appeared different, and there was this red, definite red plasma object that was pulsing the first night. The second night, it started as this flashing, what was some kids would call the bouncing ping pong ball, and it would bounce around the sky. And I remember the first flash, it looked like a flash cube, this flash in the sky. And one of the kids that was in the field said, "Is that it? Is that it?" And I go, like, yeah, I guess, because it looked so weird. But it didn't look like it the first night. And then as it came closer, the flashes got closer and closer. And I remember the second car, there was a girl, she was crying. So you see the emotion of this thing of actually knowing these people. This is not, nobody's saying, is that what it is? You know, and there's no questions. Everybody's just like swearing and yelling and stuff. It's just like pandemonium as this thing's coming towards us. And I remember the girl couldn't see it because it was jumping around the sky. It was all over the place. It was jumping all over. And she couldn't see it. And everybody just ignored her. People were yelling, and she's crying, "I can't see it. Someone show me. I can't see it." And then people are yelling. And I remember this is when motor drives came out on cameras. And so the guy had a Nikon camera. And I remember I could just hear this girl crying, people swearing, yelling, and this camera going click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, and he's got the camera on top of the car, and he's unloading the camera as this thing's coming towards us. And as it got close, then suddenly the flasher closer, closer, and then suddenly, boom, it's the same object I saw the first night. And I've noticed I had a couple experiences like this where it would appear as one object, which would change into a second object. So it stopped this flashing thing, and it was this red thing, and it had a green glow on the back. And remember, it came right towards us again. It was maybe 100 feet off the ground, 200 feet off the ground, very, very low, and coming right at us. Like, holy cow, it's coming right at us. And then it just sort of stopped, and it just sort of turned. And I remember it was flying off into the distance, and that was the first night I actually thought about extraterrestrials. I thought, that thing may be from another planet. I was just like, whoa. And then I'm thinking to myself, what the heck's it doing? It was just like flying along. It wasn't doing anything. It was just flying along, and it just disappeared into the distance. So I saw that. Then I got all my friends, and we started. And then it wasn't until we had a lot of sightings, but nothing really close. We heard some noise. We had different real dramatic sightings that people would tell us. But it wasn't until the next year, it was 76, when it moved 11 miles to the east. That's when the first night I told you a story about being at the bridge. That was the first night we met these. We called them ground lights. And at one point I went to a guy who was a Canadian government guy who worked with Wilbert Smith, who ran the Canadian government program, lived in that area. And I went to him and I said, Art, we're seeing these ground light things. And I'm trying to explain to him these objects that sit on the road. And he said, oh, you mean monitors? And I went,
monitors?
Monitors. He called them monitors. And I'm playing. So I played along with it. And I said, Oh, yeah, monitors. And he said, oh, we saw those things back in Ottawa in the 50s all the time. And they used to sit around the house all the time, and they would monitor the meetings when we were having UFO meetings. And I went, really? And this is like the guy who did all the metallurgic research for the Canadian government UFO program.
Wow.
He didn't want anything to do with this. He was hidden away. And it was only because I went to see Wilbur Smith's wife. She said, Art, I want you to talk to this guy. He came all the way to Ottawa to talk to me as a young guy, and I want you to talk to him. And so he said, because Merle said I got to talk to you, I'm going to talk to you. This ruined my life. I don't want anything to do with this. So I'm interacting with this guy, and he said these monitors. And then when I went to talk to Mrs. Smith, she told me the same thing. I said, oh, Art was telling me about these monitor things you had. And she said, oh, yeah, they were around all the time. She said, and she was telling the story how they burned out a row of beans in her yard, and that the neighbor, the thing sat in a tree, and it killed part of a tree. And it was the neighbor's tree, but it was hanging over on the Smith's yard. And then she said, the neighbor came to Wilbur and said, Wilbur, I don't know where your little friends are from, but can you please tell them to stay out of my yard? And so it was this bizarre thing where it got this validation of these objects we were seeing. So that's the first night I saw it up close. That was when I was 50 feet. I never got that close again, but I did get close a second time. And I take these kids out all the time when we'd be there. And so we had these mile roads, like mile. So what we did is we knew where it would sit. It'd sit about 3 miles down on the one road to start. And then every time you go down, you would push it down, and it would keep going down the road. You jump out, lie in the ditch, and you'd lie in the ditch, and the car would push it down the road, and then the car would come back, and you'd be waiting for this object to follow it back down. And then you'd look, and nothing's happening. You get back in the car would pick you up half an hour later, whatever, and you get in the car, and then the thing would follow you down. It was like almost like the Skinwalker Ranch. You heard this sentient being that knows exactly not only what you're doing, but what you're about to do. Yeah. You could not. So I would have at least people say, okay, I want to go see it. And they bring out these big telephoto lenses, 2,500 millimeter telephoto lenses. They'd have all these plans. They say, oh, it's a car coming down the road. I'd say, it's not a car coming down. Yeah, it's a car. And I'd say, how long do you think it's going to take? 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes there. You still think it's a car? Then no, it's not a car. It's a farm light. And you go through this circus every night. And let's surround it. Let's go down the next farm road and come back and get it in from behind and stuff. And after a while, I just got frustrated. And I said, you guys want to go see this thing? Here's where you go. Go to Highway 3, turn it scrolling, go 205, down 2 mile roads, head towards the U.S. border, and there it is. Have a good time. I'm not going. That's a total waste of time. I just stopped doing it. So
you're recounting such an important point on so many different ways. I mean, just the fact that they can not only read your consciousness, but they're reacting to your consciousness. And that brings up so many questions. Like, this whole series of events for you changed your life. Do you ever wonder if they did that on purpose to have you do what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when I saw the Newton thing. When I saw the Newton thing, that's when it all fit in. Because the Michael Newton thing, if you know the whole Michael Newton thing with the 7,000 people, they tell the story that when you're in the spirit world, you make a decision to come into this world and to do whatever you're going to do. And that before you come in, they put you in a sort of an amphitheater, a 3D amphitheater, and you sit there and you can actually watch your life. And so I may be in the amphitheater, and I see AP. He's got glasses and he lives in New York, and I've got to pick it up. When I see him, I know. And that's the thing, is the idea that you and I, this may be all prearranged, that we arranged it before we were born, that we were going to do this. And a lot of experiences, we'll talk about this. I even have one, I don't know if it's up yet. His name is Ron Johnson. And I do him. He's a Mormon guy out of Utah. I've known him for a lot of years. I knew he had a really bizarre experience. And he's flown the ship. So I asked him for an interview. And again, you got to remember, he's got the Mormon background. And so I'm not sure whether it's been put on YouTube yet, but I did the interview with him a couple nights ago. And he's talking about flying the ship. And then he said, the arrangement was before I was born. And I said, are you sure? Are you sure that this was before? And that's the whole Newton thing, is the whole thing. It's not random. These things are happening. And that if you take responsibility for what's going on, that you put yourself here. Because people will say, oh, if this had happened, when are we going to have disclosure? When's this? And it's like, what difference does it make? What are you supposed to be doing? Forget about what's happening out there, because we're externally motivated. The idea is that we are, because these things are happening to us. We're like a little cork. We're floating down the river, and we have no control over it, and we have total control over everything we're doing, and that it's how you react to things. So to me, it was this whole deal. When I saw Newton, I suddenly realized, like, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's when I put together this thing, the guy with the camera where he's sitting there waiting because they hadn't got any film the night before, this camera. And this wasn't even a cameraman. This is the first time this guy had ever shot a TV camera in his life, because he was an editor. They were going to pay people to go out. So it took a volunteer crew from the TV station that had almost got it the night before that went out there. So when I saw these things, I realized that these things were probably not random events, and that I was expected to, the old idea that when you see a UFO, you're part of the game. So I had these two, this one at the bridge, and then I had another one where we had gone to the next mile road over, and we had seen these two, the objects sitting on the road, and we'd seen another one coming down the road, and it was really, really weird, because it was like, oh my God, they're gonna collide. And I'm sitting there, and again, this is probably all staged, and I'm sitting there in the dark. This is the thing. It's like, this is 1970s. There's no iPhones, there's no nothing. You got a Nikon camera, and you're trying to put this thing on in pitch darkness. You're trying to screw it onto the tripod, because if you don't have a tripod, nothing's going to come out. It's got to be completely stable. And I remember as I'm going, and these two objects collide, and it was like an atomic bomb going off, just with no noise. It was just so weird. It was just, wow. And then back down. And so we went across the field that night, and I figured we'll it won't see us coming down the road, so we'll go through this field, through the mud. So we're walking through this field on an angle. We're going right towards it, and then we get there, and it looks like it's in the next road over. It's like it's moved back again. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a waste of time. Now we've got to walk back, whatever else. I hear this buzzing noise, and it was like, this is at the end of a line. There's telephone lines, but there's really only maybe another 5 telephone poles, and then there's nothing. So I'm sitting there, and there's noise coming, like it's like a beehive. And what the heck's that noise? And it was coming like from the pole. And I'm going, what the heck's going on? And then I looked out, and there it was, 3 telephone poles away, sitting above the wires. I was like, oh my gosh, right there. And I was just blown away, because we'd noticed that the bizarre phenomena that people you'll hear described from time to time. If you're standing, we knew this. If you stand in the middle of the road, you can see it. If you take 2 steps over, you can't see it. And you go, that's weird. It's sitting on the road. Then you go back to the middle of the road, you can see it, and you go, take 2 steps over, and it's gone. It was the same thing. It was right there, but unless I stepped out and looked up, I couldn't see it. It was right there. It was right beside us.
What did it look like?
Well, again, it was this same ball, this orange, but it's more white now, but it was a orangish white ball, like a big orb sitting on top of the telephone line. Mm-hmm. And so I had that one, and then I had the one where people always ask me, did you ever get abducted? And I say, well, if I ever got abducted, it happened on this night. We're driving across, I got these kids, and the one kid works for the mayor's office here in Winnipeg. And I remember he was sitting in the front taking notes. There's 3 kids in the back seat, and these kids are about 14, 15 years old, whatever. The kids we got these triangles. That's the first time I ever heard triangles flying out. It's 1976. Oh. 2 big red lights and a green light in the back. And they're flying with the front, with the flat end out, with the tail, with the point in the back. So they're flying like that. So these things are flying around. I said, holy cow, there's a bunch of stuff flying around tonight. And then I come along, and for some reason, I guess these kids had never seen these ground lights. So we go along, and I said, oh, there's ground lights on the end of this road. And I said, look, and we got these at another place, and I hadn't seen them in this spot before. So I take the kids one at a time. I don't know why I did it one at a time, but I took the one kid out, and I said, watch this. And I take the flashlight, and I'd flash 3 times at the object, and it would pulse back 3 times. I'd take it from side to side, and it would go back and forth across the road, whatever. And his kids, oh, he's getting all excited, whatever. Wow. And up and down, the thing would go up and down, and would respond to the light. Take him back. I take his brother out, Glenn, and I said, watch this. And I do the flash, and I flash 3 times, and it goes, bzz, 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 like a Morse code, but a whistling noise.
Wow.
And I go, oh my God, there's nothing in this thing. And I'm going, oh, I just pissed the thing off. Now the big one's going to come. And I look up, as this happens, I look up on the American border, and there's this arc welding light, just brilliant arc welding light on the U.S. border. And I'm going, oh, and I have described, you'll hear people describe this, and I've experienced this. So again, it's like believing and knowing. Unless you experience this, you cannot define this. The worst fear I've ever had in my life, nothing even comes close to it. It was like, oh, and I'm thinking, we're going to be abducted, we're going to die. I mean, it was just like instantaneous fear. And this thing's going along. So I said to the kid, I said, let's go back to the car. And I go back to the car, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm sitting in the car, absolutely losing it, petrified. These kids are all excited. They're all jumping around in the back seat. And they told me that this thing came across, and the object was sitting on the road. There's actually two. There's one would do the tricks, and one would sort of dim out and sit there. And the one would do the tricks when you flashed at it. So these two objects are there, and this blue beam of light came down from the big one down to the small ones. I didn't see that, but it's going along, and I'm just sitting there looking at we're sitting sideways. This is the American border is like here. I'm sitting parallel to the American border. I'm looking down the road, and I'm just going, oh, and I'm just petrified. And the thing goes along, and it's moving along, and I can sort of see it out of the corner of my eye. It's going along, and I'm thinking to myself, don't turn, don't turn, don't turn. And it starts to turn. I go, oh, no, don't turn. And then it comes around, and then it starts down the road, and it's coming right at us. And now it's not this arc welding light. Suddenly it's this triangle that we'd seen earlier in the night, these triangles. And suddenly it's a triangle. And I'm looking at this triangle, and it's down really low. It's down, coming down the road right at us. And I'm like, there's no description of how scared I was. It was unbelievable. And I'm sitting there, and it came along, and it came right above the car. And I remember the kids, they're jumping in the back seat. They're all excited. Ah, they're screaming and yelling, and they're all, it was the greatest thing in the world. And so I said to the kids, give me my binoculars. And I remember taking the binoculars, and my hands were shaking, and I put my binoculars against the inside of the glass to hold the binoculars somewhat still as it came. And I can tell you it was either very close or it was very big, because in the binoculars, it was the entire field of vision. It was everything. It was that big. And I couldn't tell whether it was three. At one point, I thought it was like three lights that were like 10 or 15 feet across, attached to an object. It could have been three objects, but I think it was what attached to one object. And I remember it was sitting, somehow I got the idea, it was sitting on an angle with its back end down. It was the flat end up top, and it was right above the car. I'm looking straight up at this thing, and it moved, and there was a guy, the National Enquirer came up and did an investigation, and we interviewed a pilot. And when this happened, I remembered that pilot. He described flying in Pickle Lake, Ontario. He's flying into land with a small, they do a lot of bush flying people in fishing and stuff like that. And he's flying in, and this thing appears coming from this side to this side. And he said suddenly he realizes the prop of the plane has stalled. The prop is just going in the wind. It's just slowly going in the wind, and time has stopped. And this thing is sitting there, and then as it starts up, the plane starts up again, the engine goes on, and the thing moves. And he said it was like taking a piece of film. You cut the film, and it's moving, it stops, you put the film back together, and it starts again. It was exactly. It was like they'd taken a piece of film, they'd cut the film, because it sat like this, and it moved just the slightest little bit to the left, just almost marginal, just like that. Boom, the fear was gone instantaneously. No fear whatsoever. And I'm looking up at this thing, and then it started to move slowly. It was just floated away towards this microwave tower. And all of a sudden, behind me, there's these flashing lights behind the car, and I'm going, what the hell? And it's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Federal Police Force. And they had been involved in these sightings. They've been going in these two towns for quite a while. And the two of them had reported that they had seen this thing to the National Enquirer, and they were immediately transferred out. And in Canada, you can be along the border where we are. If you get transferred out as a federal police officer, you could be in the Arctic. I mean, you could be in the middle of nowhere. You don't want to get transferred out. So these guys got transferred out. So I knew that these guys didn't want to talk. So that's when I said to these kids, I said, because the fear is gone. Now I'm all ready to go. And the lights are flashing and stuff. And he comes, and I said, watch, I'm going to get this guy. I roll down the window. He comes with a flashlight. And this has just happened, this object above the car. He looks in, and he says, so what's going on here? What's going on? And I said, see that object there? And he looked, you still clearly see this triangle flying away into the distance, still very clear.
Amazing. And
he said, yeah, I see it. And I said, well, we're watching these lights down at the end of the road. I don't say anything more about the triangle. I just said, do you see it? He said, yeah. So I said, we're watching these lights down at the end of the road. He said, what lights? I said, well, turn your lights off and I'll show you. So he goes back, he turns off all the lights, turns the car off. And he comes, and these kids are just so wild. They know exactly what's going to happen. So I take it, and I look, and there's nothing. I'm looking towards the U.S. border, completely black. And I take the flashlight, and I put it up in the air, put it back down. This orange object comes up, goes back down again, and guy looks. And then I take this thing from side to side, and the thing goes like a leaf, back and forth across the road. And the guy's looking at this. And then he said, probably just a couple of guys down at the end of the road having a beer. And I said, oh, we've been chasing it for 6 miles. And I guess suddenly he realized triangle in the sky, this light. And I've been written up on this story about a couple of months before. I'd been written about in the local newspaper about wanting to jump on this thing. So I guess he realized this is the guy that was going to jump on these things. These are the objects this guy was talking about. And suddenly he realized, like, oh, no ask for ID, nothing. He just said, okay, I guess we'll see you guys. And he starts going towards the car. He's moving a little bit faster. And I said to the kids as he was going to the car, I said, get his license plate number. And then he starts running to the car. He jumps in the car, starts the car, boom, and he takes off, and the gravel's flying, and these kids are running down the road with flashlights after this Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer with these flashlights. And they got his license plate number. And I was going to go bug him. I figured out who he was, what detachment he was. And I figured, I'll ruin his life. I figured I would leave it. So those are the kind of experiences I had early on.
Those
and
are
then I had some dramatic experiences later, but it wasn't UFO types experience. It was experiences with experiencers, like Chris Bledsoe, the experience with the dog. And if you've heard the dog experience, that one was dramatic. I mean, it was like, it's going to be in this, apparently he's got a series now in Hollywood, a 5-year series, whatever. This is going to be one of the episodes. This was just like, I mean, just bizarre things. So I've had those kind of experiences. But in terms of UFOs, like a lot of people say, let's do a sky watch or whatever. And I said, it's this thing I don't really want to see, I'm more interested in talking to, if there's a Zendra event going to happen, okay. If there's an experiencer that I can talk to, yeah. But I've seen stuff. And it would go out to these sky watches all the time. And then people would be arguing. And it'd be like a light in the sky. And it'd be people are arguing. Is there a planet? Is it a star? It's moving. No, it's not moving. And I'm going, are you guys kidding me? If you saw what I saw, I'm going to bed, man. I'm getting out of here.
One of the reasons why I really enjoy hearing you talk on the subject, and it's not just your vast understanding, it's how you've computed all the evidence and how you've reduced it down to what, for me is the crucial factor. And just everything you've spoken about so far in this interview has just gone to the point about how it's really connected to almost the subconscious, and not just the conscious. It's almost like the subconscious level. And your story, and especially that whole case there, is so amazing, and there's just so many different directions to go on it. I mean, we could go on the, are these probes? We could go on the natural earth lights thing and reduce those and pull those out because of the intelligent control. Yeah. We can go to the aspects of how they seem to be writing the story. They are writing the script. The government thinks they have the release program, but it's really someone else who's doing the release program. And this scripting aspect of it, because they understand consciousness, and Skinwalker Ranch was a really crucial kind of investigation. And we still don't know everything that was captured there. But people like you and I know, as experiencers, the fact that your mind and the minds of those involved, not only what they're thinking now, but I also believe what they could be thinking in the future and what they were thinking in the past can affect that experience. And the phenomena makes a choice whether to interact with you. Like you said about the lights, they are an advanced technology. They don't have to show lights if they don't want to. Yeah. So it makes you really wonder about the grander scripting, their grander plans. If their technology is indicative of their intelligence, then they must have some very advanced plans for us.
And I think there's also the fact that people leave out the fact that we are part of the phenomena. We're about to write an article because there was this girl, I guess she's lecturing today at the MUFON conference, the one that was at the Ariel School, African American girl.
Yes.
And she's talking about this idea where when she was looking at the being, when they were locked, their eyes, he said, well, did it just go away or what happened? She said, once I broke contact, once I was able not to look at the being, and I couldn't stop, it was like you're transfixed to the being. The being was gone. She didn't have any more encounter once she broke her stare with it. And Chris Bledsoe's son had this thing where when the being was looking at him. So there's this interaction where we're playing part of the role. And when I do the flying the ship, I've got 50 people now who have flown the ship, and everybody will say the same thing, that they put their hand on something, they become one with the craft, and the craft flies, but nobody ever describes the same thing twice. Some people say it's a ball, some people say it's a beehive, some people say they put their fingers in this chair, and all this sort of thing. And it's this whole idea that we are part of the manifestation. And that's when you get to the Skinwalker Ranch thing. The Skinwalker Ranch has a big, huge, a being, has these wolves, has all this, stuff coming out of there. And yet, have you had these kind of experiences? Has the Mission Rama had these kind of experiences? No. If you have a positive experience, if a positive mentality, you have you don't get the wolves, you don't get the stuff. And if you have military people, you're going to manifest that kind of stuff. And people don't realize this is part of the whole thing, is that you are part of the experience. Because Mission Rama, I've never heard of this kind of stuff with Mission Rama, where they have all these kind of stuff, and that's where people sort of leave out the fact that we are part of this phenomena, and that's what
a crucial point.
When this girl described this thing with the aerial school, and I think what you're going to see is that every kid in the aerial school had a different experience. The same as Paula Harris when she was inside the Zendra. I remember her telling me the story, and when I heard this girl from aerial school, I'm going, this is the same thing. Paula was in there. And she said when they went into this Zendra, this interdimensional bubble thing, Ricardo said, do not let go of each other's hands until you're through this smoke, this bluish white mist stuff that's lighting up the ground. As soon as you get through, then you can let go. She said it was the scariest moment of her life. She lets go, and boom, this 10-foot alien is standing there, and he's talking to her in this language that she can't understand. And she's freaking out. And according to Ricardo, that's why she couldn't understand it, because she was freaking out. And all she remembered was the very last minute. He looked very stern at her, like, you've been a total waste of time. And he looks at her and he goes, thank you. And he turns around and he goes off into the bush. Now, when you have these 7 witnesses inside the Zendra and you talk to them, they all had completely different experiences. As soon as they let go of each other's hands, each one was getting a message. It was almost as if the being was there and everybody had an individual encounter with that being. And that's the whole thing, is that it's a two-way street. It's not just we're these little corks floating down the stream and this alien comes up. You're part of the experience. You're the one that's manifesting. And that may be why there are so many different types of beings, so many different types of craft, is because we are manifesting, or this thing with the flying of the ship, that you are doing this sort of thing, but it's your manifestation of what kind of thing you are touching. Yeah.
Yeah. This was my controller, and I've got a bunch of different stuff from the craft, but
yeah,
everyone has different, and you bring up such a crucial aspect. There's so many cases and so many sightings where multiple different people will see different things, experience different things. And, and of course, being a pragmatic guy, I want to know the mechanics of that. Is this something that's just strictly happening in a consciousness realm? Is it materialistically, like you're saying, they are literally physically having separate experiences? And, it's surprising that the biggest investigations, as far as we know, and we certainly don't know everything, haven't taken that into account, haven't taken the psychology of consciousness, subconsciousness, because it's very hard to fake that stuff, though. You can't fake who you are at Skinwalker Ranch. If you're from a private corporation and the money and any data that you're going to get is going to go towards creating private technology that may destroy the environment faster, do you think the phenomena is going to want you to learn about them? And in a way, I almost don't want to give the government or people who want to get the data for to have better weapons, the secrets about this subconscious aspect of how to make the connection. But it seems like CE5 groups and meditators and Buddhists and all sorts of different people who lead to the same consciousness path bring it back to the UFO. And there's more and more sightings now, more and more experiences. I'm speaking with CE5 groups all the time, and every week the experience levels are ratcheting up. They're getting closer and closer and closer. Where do you think this could lead? Do you have any we have to wrap up soon. This is going to be one of the longest interviews I've ever had on the channel, but I just couldn't stop. And there's so much more that I just want to go into with you, but it's like, it's the nature of the subject. But where do you think that contact is going to go? That interpersonal connection, that storytelling, where is the script going, do you feel?
Well, we'll do this. We'll do another one. You can do another one in a week or so. We can hit another topic. But what I would say to conclude this thing is, again, it comes down to this, our interaction with the phenomena, and that the phenomena, if the world is the universe is limitless, timeless, whatever, we could be like the 5 millionth planet they've done this on. It's like, this is not the first rodeo. They know exactly what they're doing. It's like you bring in so I describe people, you see the phenomenon as it develops. Like 1897, you got little wooden ships, and the guys are hanging off ropes, and then it goes to the Foo Fighters, and then the Foo Fighters disappear, and the Green Fireballs come in, they disappear, and then the Adamski crafts come in, the people talking to aliens, then the Greys start, and it's like they're just moving through this pattern, and that you can see it ratcheting up. Even the thing with people flying crafts, or people talking with what do they call it, this spirit language, or where people are talking this language. I mean, I remember, and I always try to find people, and if you haven't been in it a long time, you don't realize this. I've been in this since 1975, and let me absolutely guarantee people, it is not the same world. In 1975, all there was sightings. There was almost no talk of abductions. That was the year Travis Walton was abducted. There was ground traces where they would land and burn the field and leave a little tripod mark. That doesn't happen anymore. It hasn't happened for 20 years. And so it was a completely different thing. There was not the spirit language. There was the angel hair, which doesn't happen anymore. There was windows. People don't describe windows in crafts anymore. You see these different patterns. And I think that they're moving us through this whole thing, this sort of raising of consciousness. They're moving us to the next step. And it's getting more open with the experiencers in terms of people coming to me. So when I look at this thing with people flying the craft, it's not like nobody ever described this in the past. And it's almost like they're intended to come to me to tell me this story, because this is part of the story they want out. It's because if you're in, if you have the experience that, like Betty and Barney Hill, they didn't realize until they've been regressed, until they went through it, they can block your remembrance of what's going on. Mm-hmm. So when they allow you to remember something that happened on the craft, they're doing it for a reason.
Just
and
like
people tell you that they are on a mission. I'll always ask people in experience. Their first question is always like, so do you think you've got a mission? They go, yeah, I think so. I don't know what it is. Everybody knows they've got a mission. It's like something happened. There's a reason behind this. And so I see this sort of thing. And so I try to go as far as I can. Forget the sightings. Forget all that kind of stuff. Let's get to the experiencers. What are you being told? What is the latest thing that they're dumping into the field of understanding and stuff like that? And the stuff is very enlightening. The stuff we've got now with the flying craft, and the flying the craft thing is not something, because I remember the first time this lady said it to me, when she said, and this was 2013, it was the first time I heard about someone flying a craft. And when she said it, I thinking to myself, woman, you're nuts. There's no way they let the woman fly a craft. Are you kidding me? And I could not believe that she had said that. And now it's like I got 50 people. And that's the thing. And that's where I think they're dumping this thing. It's like, give them the next little piece of the puzzle.
It makes me so suspicious that as you look through the history, before we had dirigibles, there were sightings of airships. And before we had rockets, there were sightings of cylinders with smoke trailing behind them. And before we had triangle-shaped stealth bombers and craft, there were triangles. It's almost as if UFOs are representing near-future technology, like they're guiding us through. Science fiction and art and creative people are the hallmarks of future technology, the dreamers of the engineers of the future. And maybe they are planting the technology, because now they're giving us the inside of the ship info. They weren't doing that 50 years ago. So now they know they've brought us up to speed over 70 years with the technology and some of the power systems and how some maybe the anti-gravity stuff works. Now they're saying, okay, here's how the control systems work for the engineers of the next 20, 30 years. Yeah. But, wow, Grant, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. I just feel like we just touched the surface of going into some really interesting directions, but it's the nature of this topic. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and your thoughts and your insights. You're such a crucial person to understand if you want to understand this phenomena. And if the government or anyone else wants to understand this phenomena, they need to understand what you understand in order to make progress. Because Jacques Vallée was looking at the material science 20 years ago. He had all the different evidences. You can do the metamaterials like you say all you want. You can chase the sightings all you want, but you're not going to find out the future unless you untap and uncork the experiencers and the subconscious. And
you bet.
Just want to say thank you so much, Grant. I'm really looking forward to the possibility of interviewing you again in the future.
Yeah, thank you for what you do. I really appreciate your friendship and what you've done in the field as well. And that's what I would remind people to conclude is, forget about what everybody else is doing. Take responsibility for the fact that you came into this world to do something, and figure out what am I supposed to be doing, and get about doing it. So that's where it comes, because you are playing. I always tell people this: if you understand what's going on, this is the Super Bowl of all stories. Nothing gets bigger. And you and I, and all the experiences you deal with and I deal with, are people who are lucky enough to play in the biggest game of all times.
And get involved. Get involved. Couldn't have said it better or feel it better myself. Thank you so much, Grant.
Thank you.
Bless you. Bless you. Looking forward to chatting in the future.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Grant.
Okay.